Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is Ariana, and this is a Soda Pop production. I am here to tell you about how bummed out I am. In my junior year of high school, I stumbled upon a book with a cover so cool I knew I had to buy it. It was this book, right here, titled My Best Friend's Exorcism. I devoured this book during classes, in between classes, after school, and I was deeply affected by it. Its weight hung over me for a very long time after I finished it. When I heard about a year ago that the icon Elsie Fisher was going to be playing one of the main characters in the film adaptation of the book, I was thrilled. And when I found out that Christopher Lowell, my baby Bash from Glow, was going to be in it as well, I was ecstatic. I immediately knew that I was going to make a video about it. So I decided to reread the book because I didn't really remember everything that happened and I wanted to be able to make clear comparisons. On September 30th, the day of the movie's premiere on Amazon Prime, I woke up with excitement flowing through my blood. I told myself I would be okay if it wasn't the perfect movie, but there was no way that it could be bad, right? The book is stellar. How can you fuck that up? So I'm here to talk about what I came up with, and I am sorely disappointed. Let me tell you about the 2016 novel written by Grady Hendrix. It is absolutely enthralling and equally devastating. This novel about 15-year-old girls is not afraid to get dark, have serious stakes, and make the difficult parts genuinely challenging. Not only are the horror and cruel aspects genuinely grotesque and graphic, they are incredibly tragic and include an array of consequences. Remember that. The novel centers around two best friends, Abby and Gretchen, two teenagers living in the 80s. We begin to track them as young kids and we watch as their relationship grows alongside their aging. We learn that Abby is not economically well off and she attends a school on scholarship with her wealthy three friends, one of which is Gretchen. She has very strict and religious parents. Then there is Margaret, who is more sexually advanced and is dating Wallace, and Glee, Margaret's right hand who doesn't really like conflict. The novel follows our leading ladies as they struggle to maintain their friendship, specifically after Gretchen gets lost in the woods and is found naked and trembling hours later. From the get-go, the film makes some pretty distinct changes. The first one that stood out to me was this. In the novel, the two girls have a phrase that they say to one another, DBNQ, dearly, but not queerly, meaning I love you, but not in that way. The film decides to change it to love you like a sister. This is the first element I want to unpack about the film. Queerness. To be clear, the book does not explicitly make Abby and Gretchen girlfriends. They never date or marry or kiss one another, but I would beg to argue that there is some queer subtext between them. I touched upon this idea in an article I wrote for my university's gender studies blog, and I will most likely make a video about it alongside my friend Sophia. But female friendships can often exist in a gray area between intimacy and romance. I'm going to shorten it to BFE, but BFE, the novel, introduced this by acknowledging the intense intimacy between Abby and Gretchen, while still mentioning the male crushes that they share. However, one line in particular in the novel deters me from outwardly saying that this is a heterosexual novel. During the climax of the book, when Abby is performing the exorcism on her own, Abby personalizes the religious incantation, stitching in inside jokes and memories that the two of them share with the power of God chants as she tries to exorcise Gretchen. In the novel, she says, I love you, Abby shouted into the storm. I love you, Gretchen Lang. You are my reflection and my shadow, and I will not let you go. We are bound together forever and ever, until Halley's Comet comes around again. I love you dearly, and I love you queerly, and no demon is bigger than this. I throw my pebble, and its name is Gretchen Lang, and in the name of our love, be gone. That's after she says, Tommy Cox, defend me in my battle. Be my protection against the wickedness and snares of this world. By the power of the thorn birds, by the sacred strength of my sweet Audrina, I deny and rebuke you. By the power of the dust bunny, in the name of the Go-Go's, I compel you, be gone. Everything that she mentions in this speech are things that we read about at the beginning of the novel and throughout. Now compare this beautifully heart-wrenching personalized speech with the insert thing from their life that we hardly see or didn't even see at all. Compels you. Love you, bestie. Throughout the novel, boys are an afterthought. Sure, they talk about an upperclassman named Tommy Cox that I mentioned, but he's only in one scene and it really only exists to solidify the girls' relationship. Gretchen has a boy that she met over the summer that she talks about and pretends to still be dating, though it turns out they haven't spoken since fall began. The only other guy their age is Wallace, Margaret's boyfriend, and he is repulsive. He is crude and even punches Abby in the stomach at one point. However, Gretchen does seduce Wallace at one point, but it is only after she has been possessed and is trying to ruin his life and also Margaret's. It is implied that Gretchen actually lost her virginity to him, but this is never really given any weight, nor is it further explored in the novel, even though the girls said that they would have a lot of conversation about their first time. The book obviously wants to give the weight of the storyline to the two girls, but Margaret and Glee are both given love interests, albeit Glee's is an adult man, a brother, Morgan, who works at the school. More on that later. The book could have easily dwelled more on these girls and their romantic affection for other guys, but it chooses to downplay and even omit this at every turn. And I think that that's for a reason. Even when we flash forward to the girls in the future, at the end of the book, once they're grown women, their romantic lives are not only breezed over, but they don't necessarily matter to the story or to the women themselves. Gretchen mentions in passing that she was engaged and almost had a baby. It is never said to whom she is engaged, nor their gender, and we never hear about another romantic partner in her life at all. Abby gets married to a man and has a child, but she divorces her husband and never remarries. He is also hardly mentioned. Abby dies holding Gretchen's hand at the age of 94. 90-something, I don't know. So with all that being said, I was nervous to see how the film would navigate this. I did not necessarily think that they would make the girls outwardly gay, but what it did choose to do with this story and queerness as a whole genuinely angers me. It starts with the whole love you like a sister thing, and when I heard that, I got a really sinking feeling. Fine, maybe they didn't want to include the word queer because it can't be misconstrued as homophobic. However, if they were gay, it would be internalized homophobia that they would eventually work through as they realize their real feelings, but whatever. At the beginning of the film, we see them walking on campus, holding hands, as 16-year-old girls in high school. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that 16-year-old girls don't hold hands. They do, I've seen it. The novel does have them be intimate, they hug, and they do cuddle, but it's typically when they're younger. I don't really remember it doing it when they're this age. Margaret does call them queer in an insulting way in the novel, but it only happens after Abby says she wants to go look at fireflies, and Gretchen says that she will too. So yeah, while 16-year-old girls can hold hands, for two besties to walk on campus holding hands with this air of uncertainty at the beginning of the film was a decision made by the filmmakers. Many different images can provoke a homophobic person to call someone queer. In fact, it even works better to villainize this person if what the two people are doing is actually very normalized. Girls can certainly hold hands, and I don't mean to say that it is abnormal. But holding hands is typically a romantic image that you do not necessarily need to use to highlight intimacy. They could hug. They could have a really intimate conversation. They could have what happened in the book. But it ended with physical touch. So when Margaret sees this, she calls them queer, and Gretchen says, "Don't be jealous, Margaret, just because you want my bod." When Glee says that's gross, Gretchen says, "There's nothing gross about the sapphic pleasures, Glee." Call me crazy, but I don't necessarily believe that a 16-year-old girl in 1985 would say that unless she was gay. Like, I didn't even start using the word sapphic until, 2 years after I came out as bisexual. Where did she get this from? You're telling me she's not gay? And Abby is silent the entire time that this scene is happening, so like I'm beginning to get mad. At one point, the girls are in bed and they're essentially role-playing. Abby is being herself and Gretchen is pretending to be the Brother Morgan character who works at the school that Abby has a crush on. Abby is laying on the bed, and at one point Gretchen leans over her, puts her hand on Abby's mouth, and kisses it. I have never ever once done this with my gal pals. Ever. Like ever. I don't know. If you're a straight woman, I would like to know if you ever did this. But I feel like if you're fake kissing your girls, maybe you like girls. I don't know. Call me crazy. Now, I am not kidding when I say that literally nothing else happens after this point. No queer subtext. It's all gone. Actually, that's not true. At one point in the woods, Gretchen is calling Abby beautiful and then randomly goes, come over here. And genuinely thought they were going to kiss. I thought they were going to kiss in the woods before the exorcism happened. And then I was like, okay, gay metaphor happening. No. Nothing happens. When Abby performs the exorcism, she does not mention anything about being gay. She just says that she loves her and that they're best friends. And then they fight like a fucking troll demon thing that emerges from her body. Literally, that does not happen in the book. There is no anthropomorphized creature that they have to fight. It's fine. Then everything is fine. Abby moves away, and I couldn't even find the subtext if I wanted to at this point because the besties are gone. They're just separated forever. The complete erasure of any complex portrayal of queerness is still non-existent, even with the film's decision to make Glee's character gay. Now, this would not be an entirely horrible idea, but it is totally tokenized and useless to the story. In the book, Glee has a crush on Brother Morgan, though his name is Brother Lemon in the book. When Gretchen becomes possessed, she begins writing letters pretending to be the brother to Glee, and Glee becomes infatuated. When she is ultimately rejected by him because he has no idea what she's talking about, Gretchen gets Glee drunk, and Glee goes to the top of the building, takes her top off, and vows to kill herself before she stopped. She eventually moves schools and isn't heard from until much later in the book, in passing, once they're adult women. Again, the decision to frame Margaret as having written these letters isn't entirely a bad idea. The idea to have Glee have this unrequited crush on Margaret is actually kind of interesting. But again, the execution was frankly disgusting. Glee confronts Margaret, and she mentions last summer, which we have no idea what that means. We have no idea what they did last summer, if they actually did have a little moment together. And Margaret, Glee's best friend and crush, calls her a and laughs in her face, and says that now the entire school will know who Glee really is. Gretchen takes this opportunity to give a crying Glee a peanut brownie, knowing that Glee is allergic to peanuts. As Glee slowly suffocates and searches for her stolen EpiPen, Gretchen taunts her by saying, "Get up, lesbo," and "God hates gays," after Glee says, "God help me." It is a devastatingly traumatic trajectory to take Glee's story, only for her to literally be fine. Literally, she's fine for the rest of the movie. She's okay. The next time we see her, she's in bed, and she looks fine. And she is talking to Abby about Gretchen. They're discussing what Gretchen did to Margaret. Abby doesn't even ask Glee how she's doing, how she's handling all that just happened to her. The scene only exists so that we as the audience can know the details of what Gretchen did to Margaret. And so that Glee can give a cliche, you have to stop her. At the end of the film, we get a "Where Are They Now" credit scene. And Glee's is a silly little, she became a lobbyist for the Allergy Foundation, which is like super nice, except they never ever mention her sexuality at all. We hear nothing else about her being a gay woman in the mid-1980s during the Reagan conservative AIDS crisis era, and being almost killed by her homophobic best friend and absolutely ridiculed by the other. It is so fucking tragic and useless, and I am so enraged by it. The novel is profoundly dark, I will not lie to you. It is a dark piece involving teenagers, and I understand wanting to market horror films to a younger audience. But maybe don't pick a super dark book and then sanitize all its actually interesting parts, only to then include something so deeply traumatizing with no real consequences or aftermath. This leads me to point 2. One of the more difficult parts of the novel to read is when Abby is confiding in Gretchen's parents about her potential. The conversation goes downhill, and it's basically the beginning of the end for Abby, who suffers tremendously in this novel. Abby missteps multiple times, but not because she is stupid, but because she is a teenager raised to believe in the justice of authority. However, these authority figures fail Abby at every turn. Parents, administrators, officers, teachers. Even the exorcist fails her initially. This is what gives the novel meat. There are definitive consequences for every single thing that happens. Margaret is never okay with Gretchen again after she feeds her enough eggs to produce a 23-foot tapeworm in her body. Would you believe me if I told you that in the novel, Abby is immediately arrested following the exorcism of Gretchen, and then she has to stand trial for everything that Gretchen framed her for? This includes stealing a dead fetus, giving alcohol to Wallace and ruining his high school football career, supplying acid to the girls that they take at the beginning. In the book, it's Gretchen and Glee's idea. Drugging and kidnapping Gretchen, which is kind of true, she does do that. And for shooting Gretchen's dog, which is the last thing that Gretchen does before she is drugged and eventually exorcised. It's a tough read where everybody involved suffers. Gretchen's mother is physically abusive at times in the novel, not just a strict, quirky bitch who doesn't want dirty feet in the bed. Because, who does want dirty feet in the bed? I'm gonna be real with you. She's so valid for that. She is not valid in the book. She literally grabs Gretchen by the hair. After Gretchen begins to get very ill, they take her to a church to verify her virginity. They forbid Gretchen from seeing Abby even after the trial, when the exorcist takes blame for everything and gets Abby off the hook. Now, I get if you don't want an entire trial in your film, even though your film is only 98 minutes and you could just do it as a montage. Fine, whatever. But this movie fundamentally lacks heart, soul, and stakes in this story. Gretchen suffers for a long time before she is finally possessed. The movie shows her being pasty and moody for 3 scenes, and she literally looks fine. She doesn't even look that sick. In the novel, it is weeks of slowly becoming smellier and grosser and sadder. People begin to think that she's on drugs because of how bad she looks. When she comes back possessed, she is described as glowing. All of Gretchen's clothes were new. Blazers with rolled sleeves, a man's necktie with a beige vest, a diamond print oversized sweater dress, blue and white striped sailor tees. But it wasn't the clothes. She had a new haircut, was wearing more makeup, she was standing straighter and pushing out her chest, but none of those were it either. Gretchen was glowing. She was spotlit by a personal shaft of sunlight wherever she went. Respectfully, she looks exactly the same in the movie. For one, she's just wearing an oversized sweater, which is not a look. I don't know what that is. It's cute, but it's not just got possessed cute. Her makeup is the same. Her hair is the same. No stakes for the simplest thing to accomplish. Makeovers have been in high school movies since the dawn of time, and you couldn't even do that right? Abby barely seems to struggle in the film because everything happens so quickly, and all of the important moments are just featured with no actual storytelling or journey in between. When Abby destroys her room, it's not because Gretchen removes her makeup. That's what makes Abby cut communication for a while. What makes Abby destroy her room is Gretchen coming into it and beating the shit out of Abby, just so she can steal her journal back. It's the moment that Abby feels defeated because that was the proof she needed to pin Gretchen for all the bad things that she did. I was in such dramatic disbelief when the exorcism was complete and everything was rainbows and sunshines and butterflies afterwards. The movie was just done. It was over. Gretchen's parents are such an afterthought in this film. Margaret's eating disorder is breezed through like everything else. They sum it up in one line before moving on. In the book, we actually see images that show the number of celery sticks and apple sticks that she's eating and the number of milkshakes that she's drinking. One decreases, the other increases. It's heartbreaking. not only does the movie do that, but it also chooses to make the meanest character in the movie a black woman. Yes, Margaret is a bitch in the book. Abby says that when she says something, she has a habit of making other people feel like they were stupid for even questioning it. But she's also a white woman. In fact, they're all white women because they live in this very wealthy town, and there actually are a lot of racist people in this town. The school itself has racist traditions in the book. So instead of critiquing 80s conservatism, the film just gives us the ripe stereotype of the mean black girl and the docile, submissive Asian girl. I just do not understand why this needed to be adapted if you were just going to do another Last Summer with the Bestie movie, but add its little spooky element to it. Why choose a novel with such intense depth and storytelling only to create such a boring movie? Last point. To wrap up, what is so goddamn annoying about this movie is that it doesn't even look cool. Look at this cover. The cinematography and direction in this film are so boring and so simple. How can you make something set in the 80s so devoid of color and just intrigue visually? How can you make a horror movie and utilize the worst CGI? Specifically for something that can be done so easily, like vomit. The vomit scene is so embarrassing to watch because of how fake it looks. We watched Mostly Ghostly from 2008 yesterday, and it literally looked 10 times better than CGI in this movie. The exorcism scene in the novel includes the trippiest sequence. Roaches crawl out of Gretchen's mouth. Gretchen's entire body stretches and dislocates. They're both transported to an ancient location before Andras begins to claw his way out of Gretchen's mouth, completely tearing her in half. And this movie just tosses us a pushpin into the hand, a stomach rising, a back bend on the bed, and a skinny ass troll looking fucker, and we're supposed to say thank you. Oh my god, that's so scary. Younger audiences can appreciate things that look cool. In fact, I would actually say that they like and notice things that look cool before anything else in the movie. The dialogue is awkward. The acting is serving hardly anything. I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened. And every shot looks like it came out of a 2000s sitcom. The book chooses the 80s to present an unflinching depiction of adolescence, specifically in a conservative Reagan, satanic panic era of American history. And none of those elements are utilized well here. The only time the 80s actually matters in the movie is when Wallace is wearing a Nancy Reagan mask and is mocking the girls for not taking the acid with the Don't Say No campaign. And that was actually interesting and made a lot of sense. Like, that to me was a really interesting motivation to get the girls to do the drugs, because I think that that would work. I do think that that would be realistic. The idea of it being like a counterculture idea and rebelling against the government to do so. But that was it. That was literally it. The 80s didn't matter in any other sense. I love this book. And I tried really hard to be content with what I got. But I wasn't, because it wasn't very good. This movie adapted an excellent story only to sanitize and hollow it out. I do hope that the younger audiences that this seemed to market to enjoy this. I think that you could. I think that if you haven't read the book, you could have some fun with it and maybe still laugh at it a little bit. But I was 16 when I read the book, and it was perfect to me. It was scary and it was intense, but I could handle it, and it made it more powerful. It touched me in a way I couldn't articulate, but cherished for a very long time. And getting to read it now as a 21-year-old really felt healing to my inner child, and I desperately wanted the movie to do the same thing. I wanted to like it, and it was just worse than I thought it would be. And that sucks. Thanks for tuning in. I do have a bigger video planned. The one I said that it was going to be at the end of September, but hey, it's bigger than I thought it was going to be, so it's not going to be out. But now you have this. Anyway, yeah, my Patreon is up and running now. Do I expect people to flock to it? No, but I just quit my part-time job. So, here we go. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy spooky season. A huge thank you to my roommates Corey and Kira for helping execute this vision at 10 o'clock at night. Would not be able to do it without the extra pair of hands. So yeah, thank you Corey for filming that sick ass intro for me. Can you stop it for me and bring it please so I can check? What?
No!
Please!